Right guys, today we're going to be looking at the vehicle-specific instructions for the ATEMU device installation. In this case, it is going to be the GS300 Lexus. So, let's do this. Right guys, as I said, this is going to be the vehicle-specific instructions for the ATEMU or Automatic Transmission Emulator Device installation, and specifically for the Lexus GS300. This covers 98 all the way to 2005 in this particular case. All right, specifically for the European side, I am aware, obviously, the US guys, you have a slightly different ECU for your GS300 from 2001 to 2005. They wouldn't actually require an ATEMU because they can actually be remapped. But the 98 to 01, of the US and the 98 to 2005 of the European GS300, this is what this is applicable to. Okay, right, so to start off with, the first page is what I call the generic ATEMU device instruction installation, and this is going to show you exactly where all the wires are, what color they are, and what they are doing, and where they need to be connected to. So in this case, you can see here, it's really nice and simple. If you have a look there, you've got red, black, yellow, yellow, green, white. I'm just going to go along there. So you see I've got red, black, yellow, yellow, green, and white. Okay. So again, it's really, really nice and simple. All you're basically doing is going from one end and working your way to the other. And I'm going to go through, obviously, where they actually go on the ECU with all these instructions. But that is how you work it. So you go red all the way down to there, and it basically runs from one side to the other. You'll notice on this one, we have actually terminated this one. So it is a service that we do offer if you guys want. If you guys are happy to deepen the ECU terminals out of the original plugs, we're more than happy to crimp the terminals on for you so you can put them directly into it. We do it for 9 out of the 12 wires because, as we discussed, it's going to be 3 wires that you are going to splice in. So obviously we can't put terminals on that because you're only splicing it and you're not putting it directly into the ECU. Which brings me neatly onto this little section over here, and this is what I call the generic diagram. So again, it could be any Toyota or Lexus ECU. There's your ATEMU device, and it's going in detail as to what wires you are working with. It's showing you that the ATEMU needs to go directly into the ECU. It's showing you all the wires basically you need to cut. So anything gearbox related needs to be cut out of the system. We will go through that as well through the diagrams. And it's showing you the 3 wires that you need to splice into with those particular 3 over there. Okay, so now then, moving on to the diagrams, what I first want to do is clarify exactly how we're going to find all of these locations. So in the Toyota diagrams, you'll see that the way it works is you've got a letter with a circle around it. That's east. That's going to be our connector. And the number next to it, that is going to be the actual pin location. Right, so now let's go over to our ECU and take a look. Now this is obviously, I'm just going to show you how exactly you would do it. So in this case, I'm going to pull this plug out over here. So this is going to be one of your connectors. In this case, this is going to be your 22-pin connector, which goes over there. Now you can see here that there's many, many locations that pins can go in, and this is how you're going to work it out. So clip at the top, where my finger is there. That's how you hold the plug, and then top right here, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So you see I've missed out that gap over there. I've missed out that gap over there. Those are obviously not locations where you can put an ECU terminal in. But there you go. That is your 22-pin plug. Now, the reason I show you guys like this is because more or less this is where you guys are going to be looking from. Okay, so some diagrams will show you that 1 is in the top left, but that's looking at the plug like this, which hardly anyone ever does, because obviously when you want to work with the wires, you want to look from here because you want to be actually accessing the wires that are going inside there. Okay, so that is how you find out which location you are working with. That's number 1. Number 2, you'll see all these wires have colors on here. Now, I don't want you guys to get hung up on the colors. Toyota and Lexus had a real habit of changing colors. The one thing they always stuck to was the pin location. So don't stress about the colors. Only focus on the pin location. And that is why I'm showing you exactly how to find the location once you found the correct plug. Okay. As we go through this, I'm going to show you guys on the ECU here where your plug is going to be. So I'm going to show you where E is, B is, A is, etc., etc. Okay. Now, you would think it would just go like A, B, C, D, E, and F. That is not how it works. And also, I must iterate, if you guys have other diagrams you have in front of you and you wanted to find these things, not all Toyota diagrams, depending on which section you are looking at. So remember, with Toyota, you would have sort of system circuits and overall diagrams. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes that plug could be A on one diagram, and then it could be C on another diagram. Okay, so always make sure that if you're using a diagram from Toyota, you can actually go usually to the bottom of the diagram, and you can actually refer to the pictures where they'll show you what, what C is, what you got here, what C is, or what A is, or what B is, etc. So always use that as a key to figure out exactly what you're working with. Okay. Right, so now we've got that out of the way. So now you're going to know exactly where it is. Like I said, we're going to go through this one by one, and I'm going to show you which plug is which and more or less where the wire should be. All right, so looking at the first one over here. So the first wire we need is red. So that's going to be plus B. That's 12 volts. We want to connect to the plus B wire. Here you go. There's your plus B wire. Actually, plus B and B2 come from the same source, so they both get 12 volts at exactly the same time. So you can actually use either one of these wires, okay? So don't stress, you can use either one. It's not the end of the world. But there is a reason why I've shown you where two are. We'll go through that in a minute. So if you want, pin B is going to be 16 of plug E. So where is plug E? That is plug E. Okay, so this one over here, this is plug E. So as you saw, I counted down there, so you'll know that 16 is in the bottom right over there. 8 is directly above it, and 1 is directly above that. So that's 1, 8, and 16 over there. So that 8 and 16, those are your plus B and B2 wires, which we refer to over there. Okay, moving on, we need E1. So that's going to be our ground. So therefore, we're going to go to plug B. Now, plug B is going to be that one over there. Okay, so this plug over here, and 17 should be right in the bottom right corner there. Usually a thick brown wire, but Toyota also has a tendency to use white with a black tracer for earths as well. But in this case, it's usually a thick brown. But again, colors mean nothing. Count to pin 17 of that plug over there, and then you are okay, and you've got the correct wire. Okay, so that one over there, you're going to want to splice in. So remember, you can see down here, E1, we're splicing in. We're not obviously cutting it. So yeah, if you wanna cut that particular wire and then put a crimp in with the black wire from the ATEMU device, absolutely fine. But yeah, otherwise you can just sort of strip it a little bit, attach it on there, crimp it, and then put a piece of heat shrink over. So obviously, if you can remove the terminals from the ECU, it is quite useful to make that look nice and neat. Right, moving along from there, then we've got 2 and P. Okay, so that is actually gear position indication. Okay, so you can see I've got gear position indicator. So this is telling you on the ECU where each and every single gear is going to. You'll notice that I've put red lines to all of those. So that's your reverse, that's neutral, that's drive, that's 3, and that's 4. Now I've kept 2 and L open, because there is instances where connecting where I call it the 2 wire, where connecting it to L is going to work better than connecting it to 2. But we do need to bear something in mind. With the GS300, the way that this particular system works is that your actual physical manual gear position is going to be park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3, and 2. Okay? So what basically happens is when you get down to drive, you can move it sideways. Now, that sideways can either be 4 or it can be M. So depending on what vehicle you had, so in instance with the European models on the 2001 onwards, it went from D sideways to M, put it in manual mode, and you had your shift up, shift down buttons on the steering wheel. If you have a 98 to 2001 GS300 European model, then you do not have the shift up, shift down. So it went from park, reverse, neutral, drive, then it went over to 4. So what I'm basically saying is when you go over, it's just a micro switch that's supplying 12 volts. So you see there, you've got your 4. And there you've got your D. So you see they go into this little sort of junction connector there, go into a separate little thingy there, which is actually inside your shifter. And it's using the 12 volts from D to then supply 12 volts to 4 when you move the gear selector to the side. Then when you went down to the bottom, 2 was exactly the same way. So as you got down to 2, you pressed it sideways to L, and that's exactly the same. So you see the 2 goes off into the ECU inside the shifter, and then it uses the 12 volts to then provide L. So the reason I mention this is if you want to have the ECU correctly receiving L or low, you need to actually connect 2 and L both to 12 volts. Okay, so just bear that in mind. If you can connect 2 to 12 volts on its own, but if you want to put it in L, you need to connect 2 and L to 12 volts. Then the ECU will remain happy, because in the real world, that is how the ECU would know it's in L, is actually 2 and L would have 12 volts at the same time. Okay, so that should keep everything happy there. Right, and over here, there's going to be park. So let's go through the plugs that are in play here. So park is going to be plug D. So plug D is going to be the 28-pin plug that is over there. Okay, so that is where your park is going to be. And more specifically, it's going to be pin 26 of plug D. You'll see plug D also houses reverse. Plug D also houses D for drive, and it also houses 4. Okay. Right, so looking at the other important one is going to be B, and B is actually going to be here. That's your 24-pin plug, same one where the E1 is. So that is where your 2 is going to be, okay? And coming over to here with our L is going to be pin 14 of plug A, and this is going to be plug A over here. So this is the one where you get your crank sensor signal from, which we're going to go through in a minute, but that's going to be plug A. So pin 2 is 21 of plug, L is 14 of plug A, 2 is 21 of plug B, and park is 26 of plug D, okay? So we've got D, we've got B, and we've got A over there, okay? Right, so those are your 2 gear position indicators gone through. So now what we're going to do is let's go look at the speed sensors over there. So that's NCO plus and SP2 plus. So now I'm going to move over to this page over here, and you'll see I've got it labeled as NCO and SP2. Okay, now this is going into plug C, and plug C is going to be this 17-pin plug over here. Okay, so that is your 17-pin plug there. That is going to be plug C. All right, there's a lot of gearbox stuff that goes into there, so this is a plug we're going to be working with a lot. Now then, what we're looking for is just the positive sections. We're not looking for the negative sections, and as a matter of fact, the negative sections are the ones that you are going to cut off. So if you have a look here, you've got SP2 negative and NCO negative. They are actually being cut off from the ECU. So in this case, as the customer is happy to depin, he's going to obviously just depin those particular wires from the actual plug itself and remove it out of the system. All right, so what we're looking for, the first one is NCO plus, which is going to be pin 4. So if I look over here, pin 4 is going to be the top row because it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then looking over to SP2, SP2 plus is going to be pin 5 of plug C. Okay, so number 5 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so that is that one over there. Perfect. Okay, so that's our NCO plus and that's our SP2 plus. Now we're going to go look at the crank sensor, which is NE plus. So that is right over here, and I've already labeled it as crank there for you guys, but that is your NE plus. And that is going to be plug A, as A is encircled there, and A is going to be that plug over there, right? So that's going to be A. All right. And in this case, it's going to be pin 23. And this is a 31 pin plug. And 23 should be in the bottom right, but the second one in. So basically 22, which is NE negative, is going to be the first one in the bottom right. Then 23 is going to be the one next to it. Okay, so that's where the crank wire should be on there. And that is your NE plus. Next up is going to be oil, and S1, S2, S3, S4, because they're kind of all in the same boat. So let's move over to this section over here. So again, this is all going to be plug C, and that is plug C over there. So I said a lot of wires are going to go through this. There'll be a lot of cutting of wires, etc., out of this particular plug and adding in from the ATEMU. All right. So oil is going to be 17 of plug C, and because it's a 17-pin plug, I know it's in the bottom left there as I'm looking at the plug at the moment. Next up is going to be S1. So we're going to have S1, S2, S3, and S4. So S1 is pin 1, S2 is pin 2, S3 is pin 3, and S4 is pin 6. Now, if you've noticed, what that basically means in this particular case is the entire top row of this plug is going to be populated. So 1, 2, and 3 are going to be solenoid 1, 2, and 3. 4 and 5 are going to be NCO plus and SP2 plus. Just get that out of the way there. And number 6, which is right at the end, is going to be S4. All right. 17 is going to be your oil, which is just over there. And then obviously all of these SLT positive, negative, SLN positive, negative, SLU positive, negative, they are in the rest of the pins over here as well. Okay. So saying that brings me neatly onto where the resistors are going to be connected. So these resistors do need to be connected in a European and a US GS300 ECU, and that is because they will cause, these particular solenoids not being connected will cause a check engine light, okay? Now, all you have to basically do is literally connect the resistor like so. So SLT positive to that side, SLT negative to that side, okay? Simple as that. And obviously these are included in the kit for you guys. Now, one thing to note is they do get very hot, and I do mean very hot. So under no circumstances are you to place these resistors inside the ECU box in the engine bay of the GS300. You have to place them outside, Okay, so for these ones over here, it might be beneficial to either, if you have no plans of ever returning the vehicle back to an auto, is you might want to go and find the solenoid plug that was originally on your automatic gearbox and trace those wires back to that, cut them there, and then you can actually have these sort of floating above the now new manual gearbox that you have in there. Okay, otherwise you can take these wires, you can cut them in the ECU box, extend them out the ECU box, and if you go take a look at a few of our either GS300 or JZS171 engine harnesses that we build, sometimes specifically for IS200 swaps because they have the same type of ECU box. Go and take a look at those and you'll see we have them just coming out the grommets, and then we let you guys obviously fit them to some kind of plate, usually on the struts on the left-hand side of the engine bay, which is where the ECU box is. Okay, right, so that covers basically all of the wires of the ATEMU device. All right, so that's what you're going to be connecting over there. All right, now we're going to get into things that are not part of the ATEMU device. So it's not a specific wire that you're going to connect, but it's things you need to correct on your vehicle. So as you can see here, STP needs to be cut and removed from the gearbox, from the ECU, and ST1 negative should be here as well. Anyway, that's STP. Yep, that's fine. We'll go through that anyway. But here is STP and here is ST1 negative. So this is going to be plug D. So again, this is plug D over here, your 28 pin plug. So pin 6 is going to be STP. So this one we just want to cut, fold it back, and then put a piece of heat shrink on because it is a 12 volt wire. It will get 12 volts when it is when the brakes are pressed. Okay. ST1 negative is also part of the braking system. So the way that the Lexus and Toyota do it is they have a 4-wire switch that goes onto your brake pedal. And effectively what it's doing is when the brakes are not pressed, so this diagram here shows when the brakes are not being pressed. So ST1 negative gets 12 volts. The second that you press the brakes, you then pull that one away and then you connect that one over there, which then provides your brake lights with 12 volts, but also the ECU with 12 volts. So the ECU knows both when the brakes are pressed and when they are not pressed, okay? And it tends to be for a cruise control reason. The reason I say that is because an IS200 manual, which doesn't have cruise control, doesn't have this 4-wire switch. It only has a 2-wire switch and only provides an STP signal to the ECU. Okay. Now, in this particular case, if you don't connect either one of these wires, you're going to get a code to say that your brake light switch circuit is not working. So what we want to do now is we just want to cut the ST1 negative, and we're only interested in the ECU side, not in the vehicle side. The vehicle side, along with the STP, you're going to cut both of them, fold them back, put a piece of heat shrink to keep them insulated, and then leave them alone in your ECU box there. What you then want to do is STP, you're going to leave blank. You're not going to connect it to anything. And ST1 negative, you can then come over to here and you can use the other one of these 2 wires. So you can use one to supply power to the device and you can use the other one to supply 12 volts to ST1 negative. Okay, so that's why I showed you both of them on there, just so that you don't have to have loads of wires coming off of one. You can have one for the device, one for ST1 negative. Really nice and simple and straightforward. Right, so that's going to take care of your brake light switch circuit. So basically the ECU is just not going to know when the brake are being pressed. It's just going to assume that the brakes are not pressed at all times. Okay, now obviously this is not applicable for when we do remaps, so do bear that in mind. This is only applicable for when you do ATEMU installations. Okay, now then, moving over to here, here's some more extra wiring as well that is not related to the ATEMU device at all. Okay, so this is where we get phone calls up saying, I fitted the entire ATEMU device, I've done everything up to here and the vehicle won't start. Well, that's because the starter relay or the neutral start switch actually has nothing to do with the ECU whatsoever. So effectively, you guys need to rectify that issue. So looking at this diagram over here, and I do have a good video about neutral start switches and how they work, but you can see there's almost no relation to the ECU at all, apart from the fact that this junction allows the ECU to know when the vehicle is being cranked. So it does supply 12 volts to say that the vehicle is cranking, but it's not the ECU that's supplying the power to actually activate the starter relay. So you can imagine, here's your ignition barrel. It's coming through here, through the 5 amp starter fuse, popping all the way down. This is actually on your actual selector switch that's on your gearbox over there. Now, you'll notice here it says pin 5 of EA3 and pin 4 of EA3. EA3 is actually a connector inside your ECU box. So if you want to make this nice and easy, you need to find your EA3 connector. You find pin 5 and pin 4. And what you can do is trace it back to your selector switch. So on your selector switch, there should be 2 big terminals those are 6 and 5. See there, 5 and 6. So those are your neutral start switches. If you trace them back, you can find them in the EA3 plug inside your ECU box. And obviously you can cut them there and just join them together. That would effectively do exactly the same job as obviously just connecting them actually at the selector switch itself, okay? And far, far easier. But basically what happens is the 12 volts comes from your key through your starter fuse, up through the neutral start switch, down through there, through the junction where it will supply 12 volts to the ECU, telling it that the vehicle is cranking, making its way up through here, activating the starter relay, and obviously that's just going to ground, indicated by white with a black tracer wire. And there is your starter motor down there, and that is where that goes, okay? So this neutral start switch has nothing to do with the ECU. The wiring for the ATEMU, you're going to wire into the ECU, okay? Nice and simple and straightforward. This is what you need to do to get the vehicle to actually turn over and crank. So this is the neutral start switch. This is how you bypass it. You can either go to your selector switch, the connector. You can either there bridge the two wires that go into the two big thick terminals, or if you're good, you can trace those wires back to your EA3 connector, which will be one of the body plugs in there. And then you just take pin 4 and 5, and obviously when you're looking in the ECU box, it's the wires that are facing you. You just take the 4 and the 5, you cut them and you join them straight together, and you're done. Your neutral start switch is bypassed, so the 12 volts will go straight into there, bypass that, go straight into there, and then straight over to the starter relay. All right. So that is the neutral start switch. That's going to allow your vehicle to crank. Now we're going to move over to your reverse light. Okay, so obviously you guys do want to make your reverse light work. Now, one thing to bear in mind with this particular setup is because as I go back to here, reverse is in plug D. That's going to be the 28 pin plug. Now, if you take a look at your vehicle, you'll see the 28, the 22, and the 26 pin plug, or what I refer to as body ECU plugs. So if you were to remove the engine harness, all you're removing, as far as my memory serves, is going to be that one, that one, and that one. That one, that one, and that one stay inside the ECU. So what that means is that if you take a look at the reverse, it comes from the selector, so we can actually follow on from there. So you see there's red, black over there. Comes down through there, goes into a junction that'll be in your ECU box, and it comes out that junction and pops down into the bottom of the ECU box, comes back up, and then goes into that plug over there. So the one that you want to cut is the one going into the ECU, okay? That's going to make sure that the ECU does not have a 12-volt signal when the vehicle is in reverse. So that one you do cut exactly as I've said over here, but you cut it at the ECU plug over there. Now, doing that leaves the rest of the reverse circuit completely intact. So all you want to do is now going to your selector switch connector. That's obviously in your old harness that's left over now that the auto gearbox has been removed. Now then, pin 4 is going to be 12 volts. And pin 8 is going to be reverse. So what you want to do is you want to take pin 4 and pin 8, you want to cut those wires, and you basically need to join them to your reverse switch. Okay. Now, don't stress about knowing which one goes where, because the reverse switch is exactly what it says on the tin. It's just a switch. It's either open or it's closed. So it actually, as far as I know, unless somebody else can tell me otherwise, just connect one to either side, like just 4 to one side, 8 to the other side. It doesn't really matter. It's only a switch. All it's going to do is complete the circuit. So it doesn't matter whether 12 volts on this side or it's on this side, just going to complete the circuit. And doing that, taking the 4 and the 8 and running them to your reverse switch for whatever manual gearbox you want to use, that is then going to complete the circuit. You've then cut the wire here so the ECU won't get 12 volts when it's in reverse, and your reverse lights and everything are going to work as per normal. Okay. Now, there is one extra thing on here that you don't need to do anything, but it's just information for you guys to make you aware. On the GS300, like the IS300, when they came in the automatic versions, the speed for the dash is coming from the ABS/VSC ECU, okay? So it's not coming from the gearbox. That is purely for the ECU itself. That is not for the actual cluster inside the vehicle, all right? So taking out the automatic gearbox, putting in a manual gearbox, even if you did none of this, it wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference because the speed on your dash is still going to work because that's coming from the ABS. If you remove the ABS, that is when your speed is going to be not working on your cluster itself. Okay, so don't worry about your speed. That will work as per normal, but again, if you've removed the ABS system entirely, then obviously that will not work. Okay, so when you fit in BMW gearboxes and some Nissan gearboxes that do not have speed sensors on the back, no need to fret. Your speed is going to work on your dash just fine. Okay, now I have been asked a couple of times as well. Now, because we are feeding a fake signal to the output speed sensor and the input speed sensor of the ECU, obviously cruise control will no longer work. Also, because this particular brake switch circuit is being removed and altered, the cruise control cannot work, because the cruise control, this is why you have when the ECU knows when the brakes are pressed and when they're not pressed, is because obviously it wants to know that as soon as you touch the brakes, it will then cut out the cruise control. Okay, so we have removed and replaced way too many signals in order for cruise control to remain. So unfortunately, not possible with this particular ATEMU device installation. Okay, so I do apologize, but yeah, there's nothing really we can do about that, because we've removed that signal and we're feeding a fake speed signal. So if we feed a fake speed signal, which is based on RPM, effectively, if you start going up a hill, it's not going to do anything, because it's going to think it's maintaining the same speed, because it's using the crank sensor signal to generate a speed signal. So as long as the engine RPM stays the same, it's going to just do that. And as soon as you go up a hill or you go down a hill, the ECU is not going to know what's going on. Okay, so hopefully that's super helpful for you guys. I've gone through the entire installation of everything, all the wires that you need to go through. We've got all the diagrams there, and as I said, you will get this as part of the kit when you buy it. I've gone through the extra wiring, so these are things that you need to know when you're doing a manual swap, so you get everything right, so you have your reverse light and your vehicle cranking over. And as I said, if you guys do want these particular things with all the ECU terminals already crimped on, just ask us when you ask for a quote, and we can do that for you straight away. But thanks for watching, guys. If you have any other questions, you can comment down below. You can also find us at Phoenix Engine Management on Facebook. You can message us there with any questions you have, or comment down below, and I'll try to get to them as much as I can. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully it's helpful, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.